The radio, or also known the transmitter, it's what, together with the drone, defines the FPV experience. That thing that is sitting in your hands, the way that it fits, the way that you can have the stick travel, the weight of the device. Remember, that's what's going to be in your hand all the time that you are flying. Therefore, it's actually very important to select a radio that you feel comfortable with, that you feel that it's something that you like, the way that the sticks move and how it sits in your hands, plus of course all the other functions that the radio should have and you want to have. But also it's very understandable that when you are getting into the hobby and you are new, you might not want to go for the best of all radios because it's going to cost you money, right? And we have to be clear about that. Today we have some budget options to introduce you to the hobby, or if you are wanting to test the waters in the FPV world, you might want to take one of these radios as your first radio, play with them, use them for a while, and then consider maybe moving into something bigger, something more expensive, something more powerful. Before that, let's give a few seconds to my sponsor who makes this video possible. For as little as $5, you can get up to 10 printed circuit boards for your special projects. You just need to partner with the right company. PCBWay helps you bring those ideas into reality by giving you the chance to manufacture your circuit boards in a professional manner for a very affordable price and pretty quickly. Go and check them out. They offer many services, they collaborate with the open source community, and your first order is almost for free. For me, the point of comparison for any radio in the FPV world as 2022, it's gonna be the RADIOMASTER TX16 as a big radio and the Tango 2 from TBS as a small PlayStation style. So consider that those two are kind of my goal, my line, and I'm going to be thinking about everything that these radios that I'm going to introduce to you have compared to those ones. Even if I'm not mentioning directly those two others, they are always the point of comparison in my head. I'm going to be talking about three radios today: the RADIOMASTER Zorro, the GEPRC TinyRadio, and the BETAFPV LiteRadio 3. Let's start with the GEPRC TinyRadio. This is a new radio introduced just a couple of weeks back. We are right now in July 2022. The cool thing about this radio, or what I'm celebrating big time, is that this radio is Express LRS. I'm super happy that manufacturers as GEPRC or BETAFPV or even RADIOMASTER, they are getting behind Express LRS, they're pushing it forward and they are supporting it. Express LRS is pretty good, and I'm very, very happy to see that they are coming to these kind of radios, because it also means that it's going to come to their drones as default. Now, some of them has it already, and in the future even more. Going back to the radio itself, it's a very small radio. You see the form of it is kind of squarish. It's not any kind of PlayStation or console kind of game. But even though it's small, it actually sits very comfortable in your hands. The height of the radio makes it that it sits comfortable on the palms of your hands, and you have access to the gimbals and to the switches without any big problem. As you see, there is no screen at all in this radio, and that's the part that makes this, let's say, a little bit complicated, because when you want to do any setup or any configuration, you're gonna have to push and hold some buttons while you're pushing another one. Like, for example, to give one example, in order to enter Wi-Fi mode and upgrade the Express LRS software inside the radio, you have to push the setup button that is on the back with one finger at the same time that you push the start button. That's gonna make the light, the LED that you have on the front, start blinking red, and at that point you know that you are in Wi-Fi mode and you can start doing the regular things that you do with ExpressLRS. You only gonna know that if you read the manual. A lot of people is not reading the manual, and if you read the manual today, again, July 2022, it's not very clear. It's translated from Chinese, probably by a machine, and it's kind of not telling actually what you have to do. So I gave a little bit of feedback about this to GEPRC, and hopefully they do something about it, because otherwise new people trying to do something with this radio is going to have a lot of difficulties without any kind of screen, without any kind of big feedback more than the LED that you have on the front. But if you think about it, you really need that screen kind of at the beginning. Once that everything is configured, you can forget about it and you can just use your radio. And again, this is ExpressLRS, which means that you can set a passphrase in the internal module of ExpressLRS, and in the future, whenever you turn on your drone with an ExpressLRS and you configure that passphrase on the receivers, you don't need to actually turn on the radio or do anything on the radio for them to bind. As long as they have both that passphrase and it matches, then they're gonna be bound, which makes all this that I'm talking about, configuring and blah, 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 simple. There is no big problem with that. Despite this being a budget radio and small and without screen, it can be used over Bluetooth to connect to your computer if you want to use a simulator. That's something that is cool. The radio has at the bottom a case for two 18,650 batteries. Without any screen consuming electricity here, it should mean actually that the lifespan of the radio, the charge that you can have to use and fly, it should be pretty long. I didn't test it, or I haven't tested all the way, but I installed fully charged batteries, and I've been flying for weeks without even thinking about loading or recharging the batteries. The batteries, once that they are inside, they can be recharged by the USB port that you have on the radio, and that will happen while you connect it to the computer. For example, if you're playing with your simulator or just connected to some kind of wall charger or something like that. You have only 4 switches. You don't have anything else that you can use for your drone. And normally 4 switches, it's enough if you are flying FPV. You have one maybe for arming, you have another one for the mode, another one for the beeper, and in my case I like to have a pre-arm switch. 4 are enough for what I'm doing, but some other people might think that it's a little bit too little. If they want to have the same 4 that I just mentioned, plus, for example, turtle mode, now you're gonna have to get creative in Betafly to do something with the switches to be able to use that as well. Another point that I found, which might not be a problem for a lot of people, is the fact that you cannot remap what switches are in which channels, because there is not much that you can do with the radio. That means in my case, for example, I don't know why, I had some weird configuration on the ports, and I didn't want to modify the drone to connect it to the radio, because that drone works fine with every other radio that I have. And I couldn't modify the radio itself to match the drone. So I had to sacrifice one of my drones, change all the sticks so it matched the radio, and then I could start using it. Gimbals are not gonna get any price because they are small and they are for a budget radio. But in my opinion, they weren't bad at all. I'm not sure about how long are they gonna last. I'm not sure if they're gonna be some gimbals that are gonna last you forever or a lot of time, but at least flying, it feels good. It didn't have any problem with precision or anything like that. And again, the way that it sits, it makes me drive the sticks all the way without any kind of problem. Even if I'm a thumber, that worked pretty well. This radio, Express LRS version, has two things that I like. One, you can actually change the antenna and you can add any kind of other antenna that you like. That's something that a lot of people consider worth and they like it. The second thing is that actual internal model for Express LRS goes all the way to 500 milliwatts. In my opinion, you don't need 500 milliwatts to fly most of the drones that you have, because unless you are flying long range, you might not need that much power. And if you're flying long range, I'm not sure that you're looking at these kind of radios. So for this radio, it feels a little bit overkill to have 500 milliwatts, but hey, why not, right? More, better, yeah. And if you get it for the price that this radio is, that's good. The price of this radio, being the cheapest of all of them, it's $59.99 US at GEPRC website. That's really good price for a radio if you want to just buy something to start playing and have a little bit of room to grow and still use your drones later. The killer thing will be if they add this radio to some kind of starter kit, because I'm remembering the GEPRC starter kit, the radio, the shape, the form was exactly the same as this or very similar, and I'm guessing that the new version of that TinyRadio or whatever the name was, it's gonna come with this and Express LRS. That drone in that starter kit was pretty good. My complaint was the radio, and now they have a good radio. That's going to be a killer thing if GEPRC matches this with some good drone Express LRS and give you a starter kit. Good job, GEPRC. Let's move to the second radio that I have today, and that's the BETAFPV LiteRadio 3 radio. BETAFPV has actually some other similar radios to this one without the little screen, which will be much more comparable in price to the TinyRadio from GEPRC that I was talking before. But I wanted to test this one, and I wanted to bring this one to this comparison mainly because of the screen. Thinking about, can that be a worth upgrade, and not just looking at what's the cheapest thing that we have on the table. So the main thing of this radio is that it has this small screen and it runs HTX software that also runs in big radios like the RADIOMASTER TX16, which makes this radio kind of very powerful. You can do all the changes that you are used to on HTX or OpenTX, which is very similar. So everything about remapping sticks or doing complex configurations with your buttons to do different things, or to have telemetry and messages, because it even has a speaker. It's not very good, but you have a speaker. So everything that you're used with HTX, you can do here. And thinking about the future, if you have models, if you have configured these with HTX and later you want to move to another HTX radio bigger like the TX16, you can just move the information from here to there and you have all your models, which is really, really good. The screen, even if it's very small, it's actually very good to read. Like the image that you get from the screen it's good. The buttons that you have next to the screen are very small and are a little bit difficult to use, but you get used to it. It's just, again, it's not like you configure your radio every time that you're gonna fly. You might change from one model to the other, but that's kind of it. But once that you learn how they work and how you use them, it works fine. One cool thing about this radio is that you have an external bay for light modules like this one that I have here. In the case of the example that I have here in my hands, this is a CC2500 internal model, which means that regular protocols like FR-Sky and DSM are capable from the inside module, while you can connect an Express LRS on the outside and have everything in this radio. This combination is a very good match, because then I can have, or if you are thinking about flying tiny whoops, for example, where there are still pretty good ones with FrSky SPI receivers, you can bind to those ones and you can bind to your XpressLRS newer ones, and still you have place to grow with your army of drones and one radio. Then we have to talk about the ergonomics and the sticks and all that around this radio. I like how it looks. I like the screen very much. The form looks pretty cool, but when you actually get it in your hands, if you want the radio to sit comfortable in your hands, at least in my case, my thumbs needs to go very down to get to the bottom of the stick, and it doesn't feel that comfortable. I have to kind of push the radio a little bit up to be able to have full movements of the sticks with my thumbs, and that makes the radio sit, I would say, a little bit too high on my hands, thing that I don't really like. If I have it on the position that I think is comfortable, my thumbs are going to be having a little bit of a hard time moving the stick all the way. Maybe it just gets used to, maybe if you get used to it, it's not gonna be a problem, but at first hand it felt weird. The other thing about ergonomics and this radio is that whichever way you are used to get the radio, if you are used to be a thumber or if you are a pincher, your fingers are going to be resting exactly on top of the buttons. Here you don't have switches like sticks switches like on other radios. You have kind of more like buttons, and your fingers are going to be there all the time because there is no other place where to put the fingers unless you have them fully down, and then it's even much more uncomfortable. And if you have the fingers there, which feels the way that it was designed, the potential to click one of those things if something happened in the middle of the air, it's actually big. You don't want to disarm while you're flying, or you don't want to, I don't know, change mode while you're flying. That can cause you a crash. So I'm not so sure that the way that this button sits and the way that your finger sits here, it's the best one, to be honest. Then we have another thing, is BETAFPV is actually famous by not so good quality gimbals. And in the case of these gimbals that I have here, the throttle side is hard to move. It's a little bit like too hard to move. And when I was flying, I felt that I didn't have that precision that I'm used to have when I'm flying with my Tango 2 or any other of my radios, and I had a bit of difficulties trying to be very precise and very focused on what the movements that I was doing with the drone. Again, this could very well be just a matter of getting used to these gimbals, and then after a while you're going to be flying like an expert. But coming from other radios that I have normally to this one, I felt that the sticks were a little bit difficult to move. They weren't the smoothest that I've seen. And you can say, well, but you can adjust them and make them a little bit more loose or something. It doesn't have a very easy way to do it. Most probably you can, but that will mean that you have to open the radio and fiddle with the screws inside and do the adjustments that you have to do from the inside, the way that it's been with many radios in the past. Again, that could be possible, that probably will help you, but if you are new in the hobby, I don't think that is one of the first things that you're gonna be trying to do, is to open your radio to calibrate or to get your radio a little bit smoother on the sticks. So consider that if you are looking at this radio. If you get the version that has XpressLRS inside in the internal model, the radio goes up to 250 milliwatts. And if you remember what I said on the TinyRadio, the TinyRadio has 500, this one goes up to 250. And you might think, well, then that means that the Beta FPV is not good. 250 milliwatts is pretty enough, I would say, especially if you're thinking about flying regular small drones and nothing long range. So that shouldn't be a big problem for your decision, but consider it. It's part of the specs. One thing that I really like about this radio is the fact that it comes with an internal battery of 2000 milliwatt hour. It's more than enough to use the radio most of the time without having to be thinking if you have to recharge or not. It's going to last you quite a while. You don't have to pay for that. Like if you are buying this one, the TinyRadio, you have to buy the batteries separately. They're not going to cost you a lot of money. But in the case of this radio, it just comes in. You plug it, you plug the USB-C, you recharge those batteries, and the batteries make the weight of the radio better, and you feel that you have something, you know, good in your hands. You can also connect this to the computer and use it as a simulator through the USB-C cable, and it's going to work as any of the other OpenTX radio that you can imagine. There are not many switches or buttons that you can use to do your regular things on your FPV drone. Similarly to the TinyRadio, you have only 4 buttons, with the difference that the top ones are 3 position switches. So you have more play there, but you still have only 4 buttons, and you might have to decide what to do with them and how you're going to organize them. If you want to do something special, maybe you have to use OpenTX or HTX and do those weird configurations that allows you to reuse buttons in another different way. When it comes to price, both the ExpressLRS version and the CC2500 version sells for $89.99 on the Beta FPV website. It's not a huge, much more amount of money compared to the TinyRadio, but remember, this one has a screen, this one has a potential to have an external module. If you're thinking about having, for example, ExpressLRS and Crossfire, you can have this radio with ExpressLRS internal, Crossfire external, and you have a very good radio in your hands. In terms of protocols, you're going to be covered for a long time if you do that combination. And now we come to the RADIOMASTER Zorro, which I was a little bit hesitant to have in this roundup, just because the price goes a little bit higher than $100, and it actually feels that it's a much better radio than the other ones in this comparison. The full review of this radio is in my YouTube channel. You can go and check it, but I'm going to talk about the key things that makes this radio different than the other ones. In the case of the Zorro, you have a much bigger screen. It's easy to configure. You have more buttons to configure the things and navigate the HTX, and you have more buttons to control your drones. You have different sticks, 2 and 3 positions, you have wheels here, and you have other buttons that you can assign to more of those functions that you want to have. Then the sticks are completely different than any of the other radios that I have talked today, with very smooth sticks, and you even have the options to upgrade them with the AG01, very fancy, very expensive, high quality CNC gimbals that RADIOMASTER has. I'm gonna have another video about that later, but that will, if you include those sticks, those gimbals into this radio, then it's really a completely different thing, and it doesn't belong to this comparison. One thing is that I like the fact that this radio is a little bit bigger than, for example, the Beta FPV, which makes it sit much more comfortable, as I was talking about before. It actually sits on the full palm, and I can have my thumbs moving the sticks all the way and have the full range without feeling that I'm taking the radio on the edges of the sides. In general, the feeling of this radio is much more premium than the other ones. The way that it's built, the material that they chose, it's better than the other ones. They have thought much more about this of the ergonomics here, because your fingers sit in a very nice position to move the switches, and if you are a pincher or a thumber, you're gonna have good movement of the sticks. The same way as the Beta FPV, this radio comes in different versions with Express LRS internal or with the CC2500 internal model, and even you have a 4-in-1 internal model that give you, I don't know how many protocols. I don't know if you even need that many protocols in a radio. I doubt that you have that difference between one or the other. People tend to standardize in one protocol. But if you need it, you have 3 versions. You have the 4-in-1, you have the CC25, and you have the internal Express LRS. The price for this radio is $119.99 in the RadioMaster website without batteries. And batteries is the weakest point of this radio, and I have to mention it here so you have it in consideration if you are deciding something. This radio has a smaller size of battery, and I guess RadioMaster did that so it fit this shape that the radio has. But those small batteries only goes up to 900 milliwatt hours in the best case, if you find good ones, and that I think using Express LRS give you, if you use Express LRS at the maximum power, it gives you only like 1.5 hours of power or of life. 1.5 hours might be kind of the limit if you are out flying many packs. So you have to get some workarounds, maybe connecting an external battery to the button, which it's allowed or it's encouraged. The design has it even to hold those extra batteries on the bottom of the radio. But anyway, in my opinion, the weakest point of this radio is the battery. If it wasn't because of that, this radio could perfectly be my main radio. With the Zorro, you also have all these things that I have mentioned about connecting to the computer to use as a simulator, and you have some extra things. For example, if you don't like the tension that you have on the sticks, you can modify that without having to open the radio. RadioMaster started with this recently with the TX62 Mark II, and with the Zorro you have screws outside that allows you to change the mode if you want to use the throttle on the right side, on the left side, and you can change the tension of your sticks without having to open the radio. To close, I can't say directly you have to go for one or you have to go for the other one without knowing what's your specific case. As I said in the beginning, maybe you are very hesitant on getting into FPV and you don't know what this is about, but you want to test it. So you want something to go for the simulator and see if you like it. At that point, something like the TinyRadio might be better for you because you are just investing a few $60 or something like that. Think even if you get some kind of sale or something, it's going to be better. But if you kind of know that you are into the hobby, you like it, and you're looking to have something that is going to last you longer, but you don't have to break the bank to get it, maybe the Beta FPV works better for you. You kind of have everything that you need here. You have the external model, you have something that works, so why not? But if you know that you are getting into this system, into this FPV, and you want to have something really good and you're willing to spend a little bit extra money, the RadioMaster Zorro might be your choice. So tell me about it. Which one do you want to have? Which one do you think works for you? Or have you bought any of them and you're happy or not happy with them? Leave your comments down here and tell me about your experience. This is all that you have for today. Thank you very much. and hope to see you soon.